Hello and welcome to the Innovate to Zero podcast, where we explore the intersection between innovation, healthcare and sustainability. In this episode, I'm joined by Amanda Chancellor, Senior Manager in the Global Sustainability Team at ResMed. ResMed are a global leader in sleep apnea and respiratory health. Amanda brings a deep experience from leading ResMed's product sustainability efforts since 2019, building on a decade of corporate sustainability reporting. In this episode, we're digging into how ResMed is embedding sustainability into new product development, from conducting life cycle assessments and setting 2030 targets, to aligning teams across the business and driving data-informed decisions. Amanda also shares practical insights for other companies looking to navigate this space, including why it's crucial to focus on what matters most and the importance of having an executive champion on board. Whether you're in MedTech, sustainability, or product development, there's something in this conversation for you. So let's dive in. Amanda, welcome onto the podcast.
Hey, Rich.
Good to have you here. How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, very well, thanks. How are you?
Awesome. Good, thanks. So just to kick off, it'd be really great to just get a little bit of background about yourself, who you are, where you've been working, and the kind of areas that you've been focusing on in your role.
Yes, thank you, Rich. So, hey, everyone. My name is Amanda Chancellor, and I'm a Senior Manager in our Global Sustainability at ResMed. And for those of you who haven't heard of ResMed before, we are a global sleep apnea and respiratory health company, and we sell into 140 different countries across the world, and our products are really focused on helping people live healthier lives. And at ResMed, I've been focused on sustainability for the last almost 5 years, I want to say. I started at the end of 2019 in our first sustainability project. And then I was leading our product sustainability team based in Sydney from 2021 until the middle of this year. And then in June, I made the move to London, and I'm now a senior manager in our global sustainability team.
Got you. And was that a kind of a ground up initiative from kind of those in the product teams, or was this a top down strategic move from like the SLT?
So I think when we first forayed into sustainability back in probably 2019, it was a group of about 5 or 6 of us engineers that went to senior management and said, we don't really have any environmental considerations in our product portfolio at this stage. Can we start this environmental program? And they kind of came back to us and said, sure, tell us what you think we should be doing. So we spent about 18 months working through that project and decided that in order to have the most impact, we should be setting up a strategy for sustainable product development at ResMed so we could really systemize it. We had a lot of discussions on whether it should be one sustainable product or should we actually try and improve product development across the board, and it was definitely the latter solution that we went with.
Okay, interesting. So rather than kind of running a one pilot through with a real high focus on it, you kind of went, no, let's kind of process map this into our like NPD kind of pathway into the pipeline of product development. So how's that kind of manifested itself? Like, what are those key goals? Who are the teams who are really involved in that process, and how does it kind of interact with kind of those stage gates and things like that?
Yeah, so I think I might step back a little bit before we get to that point. So I think we'd set up this project with the goal was to systemize sustainable product development, as I said. And to do that initially, before we got any processes set up, we thought we need to actually first learn what does sustainable product development look like. So it was a huge knowledge gathering exercise. And then we need to run training so everyone else is also aware of what sustainable product development means. Because I think there's often kind of, if you're unaware in this area, people just think, oh, it's got recycled content, it must be sustainable, or it's recyclable, it must be sustainable. But I think what we learned is that it's so much bigger than that. So that was step one. And then once we had those learnings on what a sustainable product could actually look like, then we went to try and set up the processes internally so that our teams could be incorporating these sustainable design requirements into all of their projects. So to do that, first we conducted a life cycle assessment on one of our products to understand where the highest impact areas were and what strategies we could have to reduce this impact across the life cycle. And from there, we created a list of environmental requirements that every new project at ResMed would have to comply with. And this is where we started to really set up that process, which I can talk you through.
Got you. Okay. And just jump back to that LCA, that first LCA. Did that align with those kind of gut feels as where you thought the impacts were likely to be in product, or were there kind of some surprises in there?
I think there were a few surprises. So we've done quite a few LCAs now. And if I think about ResMed products, we sell masks and we sell devices. So the masks are generally made of plastic, so polycarbonate and silicone, and they use textile to strap onto your head. Then they're connected to a what we call a flow generated device, which sits on your bedside table, and that's actually plugged into the wall. It's got a motor, and it works like a reverse vacuum cleaner almost, that it's pumping air down your throat to apply a positive pressure to the mask to keep your airway open when you're sleeping. And if you look at those two products, they have vastly different life cycle assessment results. So for the first one we did on a mask, it was actually showing that one of the highest impact areas was the packaging, which I think we had this packaging that was incredibly over-engineered. It was a great piece of packaging when it was designed at the time, when sustainability wasn't as much of a consideration. But now we're like, the user's going to be using this packaging for what? 5 minutes max, and then it's gone. Whereas the mask was, I'd have to look at the results, but yeah, almost equivalent to the packaging. So I think that really targeted our focus at packaging from a mask perspective. But then if we look at one of the devices, we thought like maybe the materials that we're using in those products or the PCBA would have the highest impact. But what we learned is that 50% of the carbon emissions from one of our devices comes from the use phase. So the electricity of someone using that product in the home. So I think it's, despite both being products to treat sleep apnea and part of our overarching ecosystem, they've got very different hotspots or areas that we need to focus on to reduce that impact.
Got you. Interesting. Yeah, because a lot of the work we've done might have been more around the single-use devices. So that use phase is like minutes. So it's interesting to get that perspective on one of those longer-term use products where that energy consumption and sometimes, there's other consumables mixed in there as well. They might be using certain chemicals or, water, volumes of water throughout their lifespan, that kind of thing. So really interesting. Cool. So in that process, you kind of, integrating sustainability into that pipeline. How are you then balancing this need to be commercial, right? You've got kind of an idea of target price that you're working towards as you're developing a product. Have you found kind of adverse effects? Oh my God, this material's bumped up the price so much. Or how are you squaring that circle of bringing down emissions through the product, but having something commercial?
I think this is the $1 million question, that if we can solve this, we'll be doing everything right. This has really been our biggest challenge over the last few years, because I think what we found is everyone is very much on board with sustainability. Like, we all know it's the right thing to do, but we're also a publicly listed company. So we do need to meet our profit margins and kind of the needs of the business and our shareholders, etc. But I think some of the ways that we've been trying to do this recently is to really build up strong business cases around our products. So it's not good enough to just have a sustainability win. It's how can this also improve commercial outcomes of the products? And if we look at the sustainable materials example, if we want to try and introduce, say, a renewable grade of plastic into one of our mask products, they often come with a 30 to 50% cost increase based on compared to the virgin-based, fossil-based virgin grades of plastics. Sorry, that was a mouthful. And I think that's the challenge, because we're being really upfront at the start of projects. Oh, we want to scope in this new material. It might increase our COGS by 5% overall. Do we have scope? And often the answer is, we can try, but it's always a challenge if you're going into a project with a cost up. So I think it's really about trying to look at the system holistically. And yes, we may have a material cost increase here, but how can we try and bring cost out somewhere else? Is there an efficiency that we could gain in manufacturing? Is there a packaging size reduction? Could we be lightweighting our product further so that although we've got this increase in raw material cost, we can actually lower the cost of the overall part by using less of that material? So I won't say that we've got all of the answers on these things, but I think it's really, you need to consider that holistic product system rather than just the impact of one component.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of give and take as you look through the product bomb. It's okay. It's okay if something's going up, if you're delivering a carbon saving or at least some significant carbon saving within that element, take it out elsewhere through some other method. So really, really interesting. So how have you developed some tools, or do you have internal tools, external tools? How are you kind of helping to quantify this? Because it can be quite hard to do at particularly at early stages when you're still like concepting and exploring avenues. How are you doing that?
Yeah, so I think it might be helpful if I know we alluded to this earlier, but talk through the process as a whole that we have set up and how we've tried to embed metrics around sustainability and cost throughout that process. So we have an environmental requirements document that was the first part of our strategy that we ever drafted, and that's got a number of requirements written across horizons, and they're around things like packaging, sustainable materials, energy efficiency, end of life, circularity, etc. And we have embedded these requirements firstly in our quality management system. So in our product development procedures, in our design review processes, in our phase gates, you now need to be referencing your performance against these environmental targets. So that was step one, get it embedded actually in the product development process. And then we've also, to complement that, developed a range of tools so that our engineers can be assessing the environmental impact of their designs from very early phase kind of research and technology development until you're getting closer to product launch. So we've got an LCA Excel tool that we've developed so our designers can be doing iterative calculations on how that environmental impact in terms of mainly carbon emissions and waste is what we're tracking at the moment. So they can put two components in. We've got a number of kind of databases in the background that will pull information in, and it'll say, yes, component X is 10% lower from a carbon emissions perspective than component Y, or this whole product system is 5% worse, like maybe rethink your design there. And I think by having that early on in the process, it does allow designers to be able to make really informed decisions about the choices they're making throughout that process. Then as we move further along, our product sustainability team has licenses to the software called SimaPro, which is considered one of the gold standard LCA softwares. And they then use that to do more detailed lifecycle analyses so that as we're then getting closer and closer to launch, we've got quite a concrete, or as concrete as LCA can be, number for that product, so we can check, is it meeting the requirements that we set out initially at the start of those projects? So I think overall, we really want to ensure that the decisions that we're making are data-driven. So again, if we come back to your original question on kind of how are we tracking both environmental impact and commercial outcomes, so we can ensure that we're saying, like, by investing this much money, we're actually having a significant impact on our environmental performance, and we are reducing that impact we're having on the planet.
It sounds like it's all been plain sailing. I'm sure it hasn't. There's probably been challenges along the way. So what challenges have you run into? How have you overcome them? Talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, so I think one thing that's worked really well for us has been setting up this process. I think if I look at the training programs that we've got in place, our product development process, the level of knowledge across the board on sustainability within our PD teams, it's pretty amazing. But we have, if you'd asked me 4 years ago, I would have thought we would have had a lot more sustainable technologies in market by now than we do. And I think some of the main reasons for that we've already discussed are around that cost impact. So really balancing sustainability with those commercial outcomes. And I think we're really starting to build more concrete knowledge now on what those links are. But I think 2 or 3 years ago, we were going in a little bit blind there, often talking about the impact sustainability would have on brand and trial and attraction and retention and all of these things, which are really, really important. But it's not a concrete number that I can put in a business case. So I think that has been one of the challenges that we now are slowly starting to overcome. And I think that's one of my goals for the first quarter of next year, is to have that financial imperative really clearly mapped out. I think the other challenge that we have had is balancing sustainability and product development, really pushing something forward without necessarily having alignment across the whole business on what we were focusing on, which again has sometimes been a hurdle that we haven't been able to overcome. So in my new role, leading in the global sustainability team, that's my main focus as well, is how can we set up a cohesive sustainability strategy for the company and an aligned position statement, so everyone from product to supply chain to regulatory all know exactly what our sustainability goals are and how we can achieve them, so that when we are sitting on cross-functional teams, it's, oh yes, we're all aligned that this is what we're working towards. It's not product development wanting to do one thing and other parts of the business not really having that on their priority list. So hopefully with all of these things now, we can start to see this sustainable tech coming into market, because I think we've had such a long runway and we're trying to do everything right, but we just are not always quite getting there.
Yeah, you see that quite a lot in why kind of corporate sustainability strategies fail. One of those top reasons is always not having broad SLT adoption and implementation. So if it isn't a KPI, like cross-cutting KPI for all units, then it sort of feels like it could be that team's goal, but it's not really my goal. Yeah.
And I think now that and the global sustainability team is reporting directly into our chief compliance officer, who has a seat at that table, we're starting to really get the ball rolling. And I think I've noticed a huge amount of change in the last 6 months on how seriously we are taking sustainability across the company and the drive to execute on the strategies that we've set up.
Wow, that's awesome. We're a UK-based company, so we're fairly UK-centric, and a lot of action in the UK at the moment has been in response to the NHS England's net zero roadmap. But we know there's other regions around the world where this is in some ways further advanced and in some ways not as formalized. It's happening in pockets. Are there any particular markets that's kind of they're important to you strategically as a company, and so you're really kind of focused that we have to respond to this?
I think the one that's the most prevalent at the moment is in the Nordics. So the Nordics are actually almost moving ahead of where the regulations are going. So in Europe, we have the European Green Deal, which is dictating really where most countries are going from a sustainability perspective. But in the Nordics, they have the requirements that are starting to come through in their tenders, and all kind of public procurement is showing that they're kind of predicting where that regulation is going and expecting us to be able to meet it now, even though as medical devices we may be exempt until 2030 approximately in some cases. So we're tracking that really closely, because Nordics is quite a kind of significant market for us in Europe, and we're also expecting that where the Nordics is going, other countries will likely follow in the coming years, because they are generally the leaders from a sustainability perspective. So it's trying to keep track of all these things and balance the needs of the business and work out how can we prioritize initiatives that are going to be meeting the most of these public procurement requirements that are coming in across Europe, because although they're all somewhat guided by what's happening in the European Green Deal, they're all slightly different.
Yeah, okay, I got you. And I guess as a global company, you're led by kind of those customer demands, but kind of knowing full well this is going to percolate out into eventually as other countries get on board and adopt similar things. And that product, that kind of that procurement for those more sustainable products is only going to get more prevalent as the years go by. So you'll be kind of front of the queue, already have your marketing messaging, have a really robust LCA behind you. So in a really good position at that point to kind of capture new markets, I guess.
Yeah, that really is the goal, because at ResMed we sell into over 140 countries. So I think the requirements from all of those countries are going to be different. And some of them are a lot further ahead from a sustainability perspective, and some of them sustainability isn't really a priority yet. So I think it's how can we identify what are going to be the top 3 or top 5 initiatives that we can introduce both into our products or into our operations that are going to be meeting the broadest kind of range of criteria that's starting to come through. And again, yeah, I think it's just building up that understanding of what the landscape looks like is part of the challenge.
Yeah. I'm going to throw a curveball at you now, which wasn't in our pre-approved questions, but I'm curious that some of the devices you sell are also not consumer direct, but they're sold into the household, that like at-home products rather than used in the healthcare setting as well, right? So
yes,
are you then exposed to more kind of end user, if you like, the patient's feedback coming through and their demand coming through? Because a lot of medical companies are in the B2B space. So unless it's a lever that's happening at procurement, they're probably not got too much focus on it. But if you've got a demand coming from your end consumer who's actually purchasing that product, that might weigh a little bit differently. Is that the case?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is another one of the challenges that I was just alluding to, whereas referencing that we do sell into 140 different countries, is that in each of those countries, we have a different model through which we sell. So if I look at in Europe, we sell mainly to hospitals. But in Australia, we're almost exclusively direct to consumer, which means that they have different needs, different complaints that are coming through, different requirements on what they expect from a product. And that's where we have started getting a lot of questions on how can I dispose of this product at the end of its life? And we are starting to investigate how we can meet some of those needs, like set up recycling and collection programs. But I think with medical devices, there are a lot of inherent challenges. But I think the other really important aspect of this is for a consumer, when they get a product, the thing that is most prevalent in their minds is the waste that they're disposing of, because that's the part of the life cycle that they are actually interacting with. Whereas if we come back to life cycle assessments, if you look at the LCA from one of our mass products, end-of-life disposal is a tiny part of that LCA. And although that doesn't necessarily consider kind of the plastic waste issue, I think from our perspective, we could have a bigger impact if we're targeting some of those hotspots upstream of where the consumer is sitting, like manufacturing processes, packaging, et cetera, et cetera. So I think part of it is almost that education piece to the consumer of, while it's really challenging for us to make your mass product 100% recyclable, we've done all of these other things upstream that may not actually be visible to you, but that are also having a positive environmental impact, because we acknowledge your concerns that we need to improve our sustainability. So I think that's something that we're not playing with, but kind of working through at the moment of what does that messaging look like and how can we tell the full story rather than just the how am I throwing this in the bin story.
Yeah, got you. I often think, and you mentioned before about the in-use phase being, was it 50% as the total footprint of your product? I think about, the more recent move towards labeling on household products like TVs, washing machines, things like that, with their energy ratings on, right? And I don't know how much attention most people pay to those. But if you had a little, a dollar counter on that power socket, and every time you took a look at it, you saw, how much it was costing you, I think you probably pay a bit more attention to these kinds of things as well, because those are the emissions, your energy consumption. That's a direct kind of one-to-one, really.
Yeah, exactly. Especially as kind of energy costs are going through the roof in some countries, and people use our products for between 6 and 10 hours a night as they're sleeping. It does have an impact. So anything that we can do, coming back to the energy, sustainability and cost kind of trade-offs, anything that we can do to reduce that or improve that energy efficiency will also have a positive cost impact for our patients.
Got you. So we've talked a lot about product sustainability. How does that piece tie into the kind of larger corporate sustainability kind of strategy, the goals, the targets that you're working towards, is the weighting on product really strong right now? It sounds like it is.
Yeah, I think within ResMed, for a bit of background, product sustainability, apart from the sustainability reporting that we've been doing for probably over 10 years now, product sustainability was really our first strategic foray into sustainability and had run probably 2 years ahead of where the rest of the company had been. So I think for that reason, it's also the most established within our company and is a core part of the global sustainability strategy that we're developing. And I think if you look at our emissions profile of both Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, the impact of our products is a huge proportion of that Scope 3 impact as well, from raw materials that we're purchasing to the electricity use of sold products, and also transport and logistics. Like those three things are some of our highest Scope 3 categories. So I think it makes sense that product is a really significant part of our overall sustainability strategy that we are developing as a company right now. But we've also recently released our 2030 product sustainability strategy, which you can see in our recently released sustainability report. And that's got 5 targets in it specifically relating to product development. And they're firstly sustainable materials that we want to incorporate either renewable, biocircular, circular content in all new products moving forward. We've got a target around sustainable packaging, that we want all packaging to be recyclable and ideally moving towards fiber-based packaging and avoiding single-use plastics wherever possible. And then we've got 3 targets that are really aiming for product circularity. So we want to optimize the repair of our products by, the repair of our kind of electromechanical devices, the flow generators, so that when they're sent to a service center, they are repaired rather than replaced at a rate of over 90%. And then the last 2, we want to improve the recyclability of our products and try and set up product recycling programs kind of across the world, but with pilots in specific regions. And the 5th target is around energy efficiency, so efficient design, where we're targeting not only reduction in improvements in energy efficiency, but also things like lightweighting our products, improving processes, etc., across their life cycle. And these 5 focus areas all culminate in an overarching 2030 objective that we want to have lower carbon products that operate within the circular economy.
Got you. There was one comment you made in there, and I should have picked up on this earlier, was about the materials. And
yes,
we hear like materials touted quite a lot as a great way to make huge savings on the carbon footprint of your product. But we know in medical devices in particular, there's a lot of regulatory hurdles around materials and what you can and can't use. Have you found on the whole that's been a really difficult piece to navigate?
I think it's actually in some ways been one of the simpler, I'm not going to say simple, it has been challenging, but I think perhaps more straightforward than some of the other initiatives that we've been trying to introduce. And I think that's partly because when I was leading the product sustainability team, we were sitting within the materials engineering function. So we did have a lot of really technical materials engineers, chemists within our team who had a lot of expertise in this area and were used to getting materials cleared and understood all the risks that we needed to be assessing to try and get these materials across the line. And I think a lot of our suppliers are also now releasing materials that are chemically identical to the fossil-based grades that they were previously selling. So I think if you can find materials that are actually chemically identical to the grades that you're already using, there's still a lot of work to do, but it can be done. I think it's when we're looking at trying to introduce things like mechanically recycled grades into medical devices that there are a lot more hurdles to overcome because of things like
absolutely
batch to batch variation, biocompatibility, etc. I don't think it's impossible, but it's not as simple as when it's just a straight swap from a fossil-based grade to the equivalent renewable-based grade.
Sure. And that only gets that ratchets up as you work up through the classification of devices, right, as well. So to be made, to be something to be thought about for sure. Awesome. Well, it's been really good speaking to you. I was just going to close off with one last question. And I really like this one because I think it's one of my favorite ones, is kind of if you were to have some of your peers, those in other companies, maybe just trying to get their team off and running on this kind of journey, or maybe trying to get some more cut through with the SLT to give them a bit more like runway to go and explore this stuff. What would be your takeaways given the journey you've been on at ResMed?
A lot of things, and I will say the things I'm going to call out are learnings that I've had in the last few months. So these are very present in my minds and things that we're actually still working on at the moment. But I think the first one, which I definitely tried to do when I first moved into product sustainability, was don't try and boil the ocean. I think it's really important to pick one or two things to prioritize and focus on that you can show the impact that they're going to have. But if you try and do too many things at once, I think you'll never make any progress. So really pick one or two high impact initiatives. And then following on from that, I think it's really important to be able to link these initiatives not only to their sustainability impact, but also to business outcomes. So how is this not only going to be better for the planet, but also going to be better for your kind of financial balance sheet and for the business overall? And thirdly, how can you also make this better for patients? If you can get that trifecta of better for the patient, better for the business, and better for the environment, it's almost a no-brainer that your initiatives is going to get over the line. But if it's only ticking one or two of those boxes, I think that's where hurdles come up and there are trade-offs that need to be made. And unfortunately, sustainability is sometimes the one that falls off the wagon in those cases. And then I would say finally, have an executive champion. I think that just helps so much, having someone in your corner that also kind of is on board with the initiatives that you're trying to push forward.
Yeah, fantastic. Pearls of wisdom. Absolutely love it. Thank you so much, Amanda. Thanks for joining us and for sharing all of your insights. It's been an absolute pleasure. I would like to link your product sustainability strategy into the show notes as well, so we can.
Yes, that would be great.
We can make sure that people can follow up on those and have a look. Great stuff. Okay.
Thanks for having me, Rich.
And talk soon. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. We've got lots more coming up, so be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next episode.